Senior correspondent, Deccan Chronicle, Chennai. Our moderators this afternoon will be Ms. Sarah Talale, Vice Consul, U.S. Consulate, Chennai, and Ms. Asha Bay, Social Media and Website Manager, U.S. Consulate, Chennai. Floral welcome.
Thank you, and welcome everyone to the U.S. Consulate General's Roundtable discussion on women in media, insights, accomplishments, and challenges from leading journalists. Okay. Just a minute while we wait for the floral arrangements. Thank you.
I now request our principal, Dr. K. Nirmala Prasad, to deliver the welcome address.
Most distinguished panelists, Mrs. Barkadat, Mrs. Rashida Bhagat, Sujata, Ms. Sarah, and Asha Bay. On behalf of M.O.P. Vaishnav College and on behalf of U.S. Consulate, let me take the pleasure of welcoming all our eminent speakers of the panel. Let me also take the privilege of introducing them to you. Ms. Barkadat, all of you know, is a group editor with NDTV, India's premier news and current affairs network. She is one of India's best known journalists and television anchors, and is also the youngest journalist to receive the Padma Shri Award. Barka, we are very proud of you. In a career spanning 16 years, Barkadat has won over 40 national and international awards for journalism, including the Global Leader for Tomorrow Award from the World Economic Forum, the Commonwealth Broadcasters Award for the Journalist of the Year, and the Asian Television Award for Best Talk Show. She studied at Stephens College, Delhi, and Journalism School at Columbia University, New York. Ms. Barka writes a weekly column in the Hindustan Times and has a very active Twitter. Welcome, Barka.
Thank you so much.
Rashida Bhagat is a senior associate editor, Hindu Business Line, where she serves on the editorial management committee, which helps the editor to plan and run the business newspaper. She is one of the senior journalists, especially among women, when women did not dare to enter the field of journalism. She also writes a weekly column on politics and edits the Travel, Entertainment, Arts and Food Weekly supplement. And she writes about agriculture, tourism, cuisine, and interesting people. During a span of nearly 35 years in journalism, she herself looks only 35, Mrs. Bhagat has covered every topic and travelled extensively to cover India's neighbours, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka, as well as to Europe, Africa, and US. She earned her master's and bachelor's degrees in English literature from Madras University. Welcome, Rashida Bhagat. We have Sujata, the correspondent of Deccan Chronicle, Chennai, who joined the paper a year ago, where she covers the airport, seaport, customs, defense services, and the weather. She has been a reporter for a dozen years, a career she began as a freelance sports reporter. Before joining Deccan Chronicle, she worked in Coimbatore as a business correspondent for the Economic Times and as a reporter for the New Indian Express. She has freelanced from 2003 to 2007. She has covered chess, auto racing, and volleyball. She has numerous degrees, including BA in English from Ethiraj College Women at the University of Madras and 2 master's degree in English from Annamalai University. Welcome, Sujata. Sarah Talale, Vice Consul, U.S. Consulate General, Chennai, deserves a special welcome. Thank you for partnering with M.O.P. Vaishnav College. You all know her as a Vice Consul at U.S. Consulate General. Before joining the U.S. State Department, she spent almost 2 decades as a reporter at daily newspapers around the U.S., most recently as a sports business writer at the South Florida Sun-Sentinel in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. She earned her master's degree in journalism from Northwestern University and a bachelor's degree in journalism and Russian studies from the New York University. Welcome, Sarah. Asha Karnilobe, Social Media Website Manager, U.S. Consulate General, Chennai. Also, Asha is a former TV multimedia producer who currently manages a new media effort for the U.S. Consulate General, Chennai, and supervises the content for the Consulate General website. Prior to joining the Consulate in August 2010, Ms. Bay worked as a multimedia content producer for NBC, website editor, writer for the Veterans Health Administration website editor and writer for NPR, website producer for CNBC, and television production assistant for CNN. Ms. Asha Bay has a bachelor's degree in communication from the University of Buffalo, New York, and a master's degree in journalism from American University in Washington, D.C. She is a member of the Asian American Journalists Association and the South Asian Journalists Association, where she also served as a board member. Welcome, Asha. We also have Rajini Vaidyanathan, reporter and representative from BBC. Rajini Vaidyanathan is an award-winning reporter and a presenter with the British Broadcasting Corporation based in Mumbai. She currently presents India Business Report on BBC World TV and reports on a wide range of news stories across television, radio, and online for BBC News. During her 11-year stint with the company, she has reported from across the world, including from Jerusalem and the West Bank, Romania, Brazil, and many others. She also completed 2 stints as a reporter in Washington, D.C. for the BBC, including covering the 2008 election from the New Hampshire primaries to the election and inauguration of Barack Obama. She also spent several years working as a political reporter in UK and has interviewed Tony Blair, David Cameron, Gordon Brown, and Al Gore, and among others. Away from the news, she is also reported live from the red carpet at the Oscars and presented a Bollywood radio show for BBC Radio. Welcome, Rajini Vaidyanathan.
Thank you, ma'am. I now request Ms. Bay to make the opening remarks, provide the outline of the program, and set the stage for the discussion.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Prasad. And welcome, everyone. As Dr. Prasad mentioned, I manage the social media effort at the Consulate, which includes our social media pages on Facebook, Twitter, Flickr,
working as a political
YouTube,
reporter
and now
in UK
Google+.
and has interviewed Tony Blair.
Prior to joining the Consulate, as Dr. Prasad mentioned, I worked behind the scenes and online at NBC, CNBC, and CNN. And it was when I was at CNN that I remember one of my fellow producers telling me the story of Christiane Amanpour and how, when she was just starting out as an assistant on the news desk, her boss told her, "You'll never make it here." The sad part about that story is that her boss was a woman, but the great part of that story is that her boss was wrong, so very wrong. As you know by now, Christiane Amanpour made it big at CNN. She worked her way up through every level of journalism there, from writer to field producer to producer and eventually to reporter on the front lines. Christiane Amanpour didn't take no or you can't for an answer. She found a way to make her dreams come true. At a recent event held in honor of Women's History Month, which is celebrated every March in the United States, Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, who, by the way, is the 3rd woman and the only former First Lady to become Secretary of State, Secretary Clinton delivered a similar message. She said, "I believe being a woman of the world means facing up to the obstacles you confront. It means never giving up. Never giving up on yourself, never giving up on your potential, never giving up on your future. Wise words from a wise woman. I look forward to hearing from our panelists today about how they've been successful in journalism, what it took for them to get ahead, and how they're navigating the social media scene. So please welcome my co-moderator and colleague, U.S. Vice Consul and former sports business reporter Sarah Talale, who will now take the lead.
Thank you, Asha. We are really lucky today to have such talented panelists to share their experiences and advice with you. If you include Asha and myself, the group has more than 105 years of journalism experience. You've gotten an introduction from Dr. Prasad to our panelists, so I want to start the program as quickly as possible. As someone who has had a long career in newspaper journalism, I am excited to see so many people in India reading newspapers and paying attention to the media in general. To quote Secretary of State Hillary Clinton from the policy speech she gave at Anna Centenary Library last July, "I never know what I'm going to find when I turn the page of one of your newspapers, and I'm always both delighted and surprised." So let's get started. Just a reminder that our program is being streamed live on the Consulate website at chennai.usconsulate.gov, and we are live tweeting as well. If you'd like to join the conversation, please add hashtag WHM for Women's History Month and hashtag media to your tweets. Since many of our audience are aspiring young journalists, we would like the panelists to explain how they got into the business. We'll start with Rashida. Could you tell us how you broke into journalism and what it was like when you started in the business?
Okay. Well, this was 1978. I did not plan to be a journalist. I got married, was sitting at home, and out of sheer boredom, looking for a job, I saw an advertisement in the Indian Express which somehow wanted a graduate in MA in English literature. So I applied for a sub-editor's post, was interviewed, and offered a reporter's job. And I just got into the profession without any training or anything. I believe even today that the best learning is on the job. You can't do it better than on the job. Well, 1978, Chennai was a very, very different place. I was the first woman reporter in a mainstream English daily in South India. Thank you. So you can imagine the resistance, the anger from my male colleagues saying that they had seen women on the desk, but not in reporting. They were not too happy to have a woman share that space with them because it was a man's world. This is about 34 years ago. I faced a lot of obstacles. At first, I was like a showpiece. The chief reporter was very happy to have me because it was his challenge. It was his thing to the desk, news desk, that look here, even I can have a woman. But the moment I started performing, doing well, they tried their best to get rid of me. In 1980, I became pregnant with my first child, and that was the time a huge effort was made to get rid of me. I took leave from work for about 7 months, thinking I would never get back. I mean, what can be more exciting than having a child? But then, once the child starts crawling in a little bit on its own, I wanted to get back. And then was told that, no, why don't you stay at home? Why should you come back? And you'll be always worried about the child and worried about where the disposable, bottle is, where the nappies are. And I said, nothing doing. I was on leave. I'm back. Is that okay?
And the rest is history.
And the rest is history. I've had the most exciting, it's been a very, very exciting journey.
Thank you very much. I think we'd like to move to Barka now, if she's ready. Can you tell us how you broke into journalism, Barka?
Well, I think, thank you so much. I'm sorry I can't be there in person, but it's a pleasure to join in this program, and I'm hoping you're able to hear me clearly. I just heard Rashida describe how she got into journalism, and I have to say that first I think we owe a lot to our seniors, people like Rashida and my mother's generation. I'm the daughter of a journalist, Prabha Dutt. In many ways, they broke the glass ceiling for women of my generation and women who've come after them, and I think we owe them a lifetime of debt for that. In my case, I grew up on stories of journalism, how tough it was for women to break in. One of the famous stories in my house was how when my mother, a journalist with the Hindustan Times, wanted to cover the 1965 war, she was actually denied that opportunity by her news editor, who said, "Are you absolutely crazy? We don't send women to the war front." Remember, this was a time when they thought that women were only good for covering flower shows and soft stories, and I'm sure Rashida can also share some of her own experiences with the battles she had to face breaking those kind of walls. So I grew up hearing my mother basically how she told her news editors that, fine, if you're not going to send me to the war front, let me go and meet my parents. So basically she made up this little fictional story, and she said that I'm going to go and meet my parents who live in Punjab, and she went to the war front all by herself, pretending that she was going on holiday. And when she reached the front line, she started sending dispatches, and because the dispatches were so good, the Hindustan Times was forced to publish them. Now, this is the kind of influence I grew up in. And in 1999, when I wanted to go and cover the Kargil war, I think what had changed was I did not face any resistance from my news editors. I did not face any resistance from my employers. But the resistance I initially faced, a little bit, not too much, was from the Indian Army, who said, "We can't have women at the war front. We can't look after you." And I said, "You know, you don't have to look after me. I look after myself." And they said, no, there'll be practical problems. And I said, "For example?" And they said, "What about bathrooms? Where will you go to the loo? Where will you sleep?" And I said, "You know, under a tree or behind a rock, just like the boys." So I think a lot is, I think a lot has changed, but I think what hasn't changed is that our conflicts, they were external for the generation that came before us. For women who really had to fight it, they were fighting their newsrooms. Today, our dilemmas and our conflicts are inside. I know when I was at the war front, I was very conscious that nobody should call me a softie, nobody should call me girly. So I think our conflicts have moved from external to internal. Our dilemmas have moved into an internal space. So I got into journalism because I just love the news, I just love the adventure, and I always tell young women, if you want to join journalism, please don't join it because you think television's a glamorous job. It's the worst reason to join television. Please join news if you love it, if you have a story to tell, and you feel a passion for that story.
How they've been successful in
Thank you,
journalism.
Varka. That was wonderful.
Can you get ahead?
Sujata.
Good afternoon. Actually, I had no godfathers or I had no one in my family who was a journalist. But then, to introduce myself, I played chess for 20 years. In fact, principal would have known me. The same auditorium I have received some prize from too. So that way, the journalists used to come and talk to me when I used to go for chess tournaments. So at one time I thought, why not I also become a journalist so that I can write about other chess players, It was something like I wanted to do only sports. So I just checked with an Indian Express reporter, and he told me, "You just finish your degree and come to us, we'll give you a job." And when I went, they also gave me a job. So my first job was at Hyderabad. Only thing is I had to take a test, and it was for a sub-editor post, and I flunked that test. It was for 2 hours, and I wrote for only 10 minutes because I could answer only the grammar part. They were asking questions about, local body elections in Hyderabad and, translate a Telugu copy into an English and all those things. I was in Chennai and I never knew Telugu. So I just went there, I took test for 10 minutes and I failed the test. But the thing is, since I was a chess player, they immediately gave me the job. I was the first one to join, though 200 people took that test. And that 1 year in Hyderabad, as a sports journalist, in fact, I was the only women's sports journalist in Hyderabad at that time. And I was pampered like anything. Even in my office or outside, wherever I go for reporting, they will always make sure I reach my office safe or my home safe, I was like very pampered in beginning of my career. And I would say even now, till now, I've been always, supported by senior people. men journalists, and I never felt any bias or anything of that sort. So I just grew up, and as like any other home, my parents also wanted me to get married. So I got married and I settled down in Coimbatore. So again, I went back to Indian Express, and they said, no doing with sports because, you don't have an opening in Coimbatore. You have to do general reporting. I said, okay, let me learn what is general reporting. It's like what Rashida said. It was on the spot. I was learning what is, covering education or crime or whatever it is. And then I thought, how will I grow faster? Then there was a vacancy in economic times. And since Coimbatore is a place where, you have all these entrepreneurial people and then commodities, and Tirupur was nearby, and it was an industrial city. So I thought, okay, let me give a try in business reporting. So when I joined the economic times, I didn't even know what were commodities and what are the things that I have to do. But then I still had, excellent colleagues, my boss in Chennai and all of them, who helped me to learn on the spot. And for 3 years, I was in Coimbatore covering commodities. Then as usual, the changes happen in the family. My husband moved to Chennai, and so I also had to come to Chennai. That was the time I thought, okay, let me shift again. And I moved to Deccan Chronicle. And here again, I have excellent people who, supported me, and like I've completed 1 year doing a lot of city beats and airport stories. So this is how I came to journalism.
Thank you. Thank you, Sujata. Rajni?
Hello, can you all hear me? Can you hear me? Yeah, okay, great.
Can hear you.
I just want to apologise as well that I can't be there in person. Ninge Padirka, that's my Tamil. I wish I was in Chennai with you all today. How did I get into journalism? I guess I have a slightly different background, growing up as an Indian in the UK. And one of the biggest challenges wasn't with the media itself, but was with the Indian community. I remember when I was probably about 17 and my local Indian doctor telling me that there was no way I would make it in journalism, and that I should be a lawyer or an accountant or a doctor, in fact. And I'm from a family of doctors. Both my sisters are in the medical profession, but my parents were always very supportive with the fact that I wanted to be a journalist. But I knew it would be 15 times harder, not only because there weren't that many women in journalism in the UK, but there weren't that many people from a diverse background in journalism. That number's certainly gone up in recent years. The BBC has many more female Indian journalists, but still not as many in the field. It's still much more in the studio. So I suppose, how did I get into it? I was just very determined. I was prepared to work for free a lot of the time. So my first kind of free stint as a journalist was working at BBC Westminster as a researcher. I also started my own music fanzine as a teenager, so I used to kind of go to concerts and photocopy my magazine and send it out. So I just knew that I didn't have any family connections like a lot of people in the UK did in terms of getting into journalism. So I knew I had to do it myself. And I suppose I just persisted and was lucky enough after my second attempt to get onto the BBC News trainee scheme, which was the biggest kind of in for me because it just boosted my confidence. I think that's one of the things I've found in newsrooms in the UK and in the US is it's definitely a man's world. And confidence is sometimes an issue for a lot of women journalists, being able to stand your own in a newsroom, in a meeting, that kind of thing. So I guess that was how I got into it. And yeah, now I'm in Mumbai, but as the biog said, I've worked in Washington and in Westminster, two very male-dominated worlds. So, you know, sometimes it is hard, but you just have to persevere. And persistence, I think, is the only way you can really succeed, by not really accepting a no and carrying on applying for things and be willing to do things for free sometimes as well.
So let's get started. Just a reminder that our program...
Thanks, Ranjali. So all of you have been talking a little bit about these obstacles that you faced and how you overcame them, or in some cases you may not have had that many obstacles. I'm just wondering, how has social media affected your work?
It's being streamed live on the Consulate website at Chennai.
We'll put that question to Rajni. How do you use social media?
Sorry, could you
in
just
your work?
repeat the question, please? Could you repeat the question, please? Sorry, I couldn't hear it.
I was wondering, well, we're wondering, how has social media affected your work? How has it affected coverage on the news side?
Flash these. I'm on a live video chat. Flash these.
Before we talk about social media specifically, I
Sorry,
think
for issue we're asking is to vote against Anshuman Mishra or to not vote for Anshuman Mishra.
Just a minute.
Just correct that in flash, please.
Barker, can you turn your microphone.
Sorry, could you repeat that? The line's
Oh,
just completely dodgy.
Yeah, Barca, we wonder maybe you might want to put your microphone on mute because I think we're picking up some outside noise.
I can't hear at all. Could you just be a little louder, hold the mic a little closer?
Sure. Can you hear me now?
Yes, much better.
Okay. Sorry, Rajani is talking, but we're getting some feedback from other areas.
Okay, shall I start again?
Yes, please.
You can start again.
Okay. You asked me about how social media has changed journalism from my perspective. I want to sort of go back a bit and talk about the internet as a whole. I remember when I arrived in 2008 into the Washington Bureau, and everyone talked about that being the YouTube or the social media election when it came to Barack Obama winning. But in terms of being a journalist, I started writing a lot more for online. I trained in television, then I moved to radio, and then started writing for online a lot more. Most people do it the other way. Most people think it's all about television, and certainly that's the thing that you want to be on. But I saw that there was a gap in 2008 in terms of writing interesting articles for the BBC website from Washington, specifically about the election. And the one thing that all our editors realized is that we were able to see how many people were reading our articles. So I wrote an article about Tina Fey impersonating Sarah Palin, and we got 2 million hits over the course of a few days, and we could see that, and we started to realize that a whole swathe of our audience was interested in reading online, and I think that was the precursor to kind of our social media presence at the BBC, realizing that a lot of our audience don't come home anymore and watch the nightly news. They come home, they switch on their computer and see what's going on. Likewise now with social media, they'll go onto Facebook, and we can see what articles are shared on the BBC website, and the vast majority, specifically in India actually, are shared via Facebook. So I think for us it's changed the just one last point on that. When there's a breaking story 5-6 years ago, the first priority as a global journalist was to make sure we were filing for the World Service. Now we have to make sure we get breaking news copy for the website as well, because that's where news is broken.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Sujata, would you like to comment on that?
Yes, I heard Rajni with great interest, and I would say that the landscape is in the midst of dramatically altering in India. We're kind of in the middle of this social media sort of eruption, as it were. And I actually wrote on Twitter quite coincidentally this morning saying that Twitter has become the new wire agency for most journalists. So what PTI and UNI used to be for print journalists maybe 30 years ago, Twitter has become that first source. In fact, a lot of politicians have begun to quite cleverly use it as a platform to put a quote out there, knowing that it'll be picked up by everybody. But one thing I'd like to say is that while I'm very active on Twitter, and in fact, the number of the audience that one gets online, for example, I have more than 5 lakh people on my Twitter page following me, is sometimes more than the average audience for an English news bulletin at night. One has to be careful about not seeing social media as a standalone sort of place. The way I see social media is that I see it as an adjunct. I see it as an adjunct to my main job, which remains television. And I still remain a bit concerned about the absence of gatekeeping, or the absence of editorial gatekeeping online. So what I mean by that is that somebody can put out, especially in the midst of breaking news, an incorrect fact online, and a journalist in mainstream media can pick up that fact without corroborating it. So what I'm really saying here is that Twitter is a fascinating, or social media in general is a fascinating source for leads, for sources of information, but the old-fashioned rules of journalism still apply. 2 sources and attribution, and you've got to do your fact-checking. And I think social media sometimes forgets those rules, and those old-fashioned rules can never go out of style.
Great, thank you, Barca. Sujata?
Yeah, maybe I can just share some personal experience, but generally, nothing happens today without Google. We always, do some Googling before we do anything. So it's not just that it helps us understand things, but it also gets us views of others also. When you go to the social media like Twitter, Facebook, or even other things like LinkedIn and stuff like that. So that way, you also get a lot of contacts in social media, a lot of celebrities, and even when you do a story, you need some quick information. You can always, go to some social media, get their email address, mail them a question, or, get their reply and all that. So that way, we should be active in social media, and it helps us in our career. It actually lessens our, background check works that we need to do when we prepare for a assignment or an interview or whatever. Earlier, I still remember when I started, I used to go to the library, check through old, the stories like who won, how many times they have won and all that in sports. But now, at a click of a button, you get all the details, the statistics. So you just have to add what happened today. Maybe you need to go to the field to know the human element. Otherwise, you get all the details online. Even the matches, even if you take cricket, it's, you see it in TV and it's just reported the same. Only thing is you need to be there to talk to them and find out what is the, crowd reaction and stuff like that. So that way social media is very, very useful. Thank you.
Thanks. Well, I joined Twitter immediately after it started and then gave it up somewhere along the way. But I'm an avid Facebooker. Social media is useful. It gives us an idea of the trends, especially what some of my friends are reading. But as Barkha said, you have to be very careful. And Sujata, you mentioned Google. Again, very, very careful. Yeah. There is no substitute to hard work in journalism. Google and other things give you shortcuts, but these shortcuts can get you into trouble. So you have to be very, very careful. But yes, Facebook has given me tips like, when Devanand passed away, when Shammi Kapoor passed away, and Narendra Modi made it to the Time magazine cover. So, Gujarati pride went into an overdrive. So immediately I was able to just write a story for Business Line. So it gives us tips. It tips you off. But apart from that, I don't think a journalist should depend too much on social media. It's a good tool to share, to unwind with your friends and all. But when it comes to serious journalism,
absolutely. I agree, absolutely. I mean, just to share a funny story, Wikipedia, for example, somebody keeps going on Wikipedia and saying I've been married twice, and I want to say that's news to me. So if you're writing an article on me, don't use Wikipedia as your research tool, just a friendly advice.
As a former journalist, or I like to say recovering journalist, I'm comforted to hear the importance of hard work and fact-checking. One of the reasons I left the business in the United States is because it had changed so significantly. I love the social media. It's a wonderful way to reach people quickly, but the fact-checking did decline online sometimes. I'm wondering from the panel, what are the most exciting events you've covered during the course of your career? Should we start with Sujata?
Okay.
Is that to me? Sorry, I can't hear. Oh, Sujata.
Sujata.
Okay.
In fact, my first assignment, I would say, was a World Chess Championship. It was at New Delhi, and it was a tournament where Vishwanathan Anand became the first, his first world title was won in that championship. So I was actually just out of college. I just walked into the newsroom, and like any other college, they were ragging me in the newsroom. All people from Express, Hindu and Times of India, they were like, I was a freelancer at that time, and they were ragging me. In fact, I was covering for a website, so maybe I should support social media more there. But then, that was the time when, everybody was hoping that Anand would win a title, He had never won the Ultimate World Championship title. So everyone wanted him to win. And there was a day when, it was his birthday. And then he was playing with a former world champion, and he was in a minus position. So everybody was tensed and all that. But ultimately, he won that game, and later he told us that he never loses his game on his birthday and all that. So that was one, excellent experience I had. It was a very exciting thing because being a chess player, I was able to meet a lot of grandmasters and world champions there. So it was more like a personal friend more than a professional friend. I was enjoying that experience. But if you ask me hardcore, maybe when I joined Express and then when I was covering the Afro-Asian Games, there was this India-Pakistan hockey match. So anything India-Pakistan was always, electrifying. And then we not only had hockey match, we also had boxing, where, this Vijayendra Singh, today he is an Olympian. At the time he was 17 years old, and he won the first, international medal. And, being on the spot, you love sports, and then you are paid to go and watch the game and report. Those were like a lot of happiness and very excitement. So those, matches were very, very exciting for me. Then back in Coimbatore, I was doing commodities. So at the time, my office gave me the, comfort to do any, report any commodity and from any part of the country. So there used to be breaking news in cotton industry in Mumbai. So I was sitting in Coimbatore and, using all these long distance calls and internet, I was able to do, some breaking stories also, which were not there in other papers. So that way, I was able to, excite myself sitting in a tier 2 city also. I was able to get some stories and things like that. And now Chennai, moving to a bigger city compared to Hyderabad and Coimbatore. Every day is a, excitement kind of thing. It's not that, you do a particular event and then you get excited. For me, filing an exclusive copy, filing something new, filing something, even if it is an ordinary assignment, I get excited when you file my copy, and more so when I see it the next day. Probably I still in a level where for me, seeing my bylines are very, very important. Something of that sort. Yeah.
Thank you. How about you, Ranjani?
I think the first thing to say to everybody in the audience is you hear people when you go to these kind of journalism talks and you talk about all these amazing stories that they've done. But it's worth just sort of mentioning that, the best bit of advice I could give anyone is to just remember it's all about getting a good story and starting out. I started in local TV about a decade or more than a decade ago, and the principles are still the same. It's about, having a nose for a good story, being at one with your contributor, making them feel relaxed, and, building good contacts. And you will start doing stories that might seem slightly insignificant, but they're still very important to the audience that you're reporting them on. So I could talk about some of the stories that I feel privileged to be part of, which would include, as I mentioned before, covering the 2008 election from sort of New Hampshire and the primaries, right through to seeing Barack Obama speak the day before the election and seeing Mr. and Mrs. Obama dance a few meters away from me the day they were into the White House. I've also reported from the Oscars, the red carpet, the year of Slumdog Millionaire. I was also in Downing Street the day that Gordon Brown took over from Tony Blair. And those are moments where you kind of have to pinch yourself. I've sat in Tony Blair's seat, the cabinet chair in Downing Street, and joked with him that it would be scary if I was Prime Minister, which it definitely would be. But, all those moments are, of course, really amazing because you're front row on history. But it's important because every story that I do is just as amazing. Even if it was a story I did last week where I, may have interviewed some people who just work in Mumbai somewhere, because we get a window as journalists to people's lives. We go into people's houses, we go into their offices. We often, in TV, move their furniture around a lot and inconvenience them in other ways. I'm sure Barker can relate to that one. And, we really do walk into people's lives. So it doesn't matter whether I'm in Downing Street or it's one of the many amazing stories Barker's covered. We've got to treat every story with the same amount of respect and privilege because we are really lucky that we get to do what we do.
I think I'll take it. Okay. There have been so many exciting moments. Like I have been to Iraq twice, Afghanistan, and then I have been to Jaffna in 1998. I interviewed the mayor of Jaffna. The next morning, she was shot dead at the same time in the same room. I was to interview the brigadier. He was shot dead the earlier day. These were all, it was not like I took the kiss of death to Jaffna, of course. But a couple of assignments I remember. One most satisfying has been the conviction of the fake godman, Swami Premananda. I'm sure some of you remember that. He was a fake Swamiji in Pudukkottai. And I was in the Express then, 1994, I think, yes, end of 94. And two girls from his ashram came to me saying that, a lot of hanky-panky is going on. The Swamiji is raping all the destitute women in that ashram. So I said, I just can't write a story like that. Have you been affected? First, I said no. They had come with a man. I asked the man to wait outside. And then they started crying and saying, yes, we have been raped several times by him. So I went to the place. I had to be very careful. I was warned by my office because Swami Premananda's devotees were high-profile people like Sashikala, who has just been thrown out of Pose Garden. Some of the ministers in Jayalalitha's cabinet, they were all devotees and would go to the ashram. I posed as a Gujarati devotee and went to the ashram. As it is, my Tamil is quite bad, so it was okay. I talked to him. I talked to a lot of people there. came back and wrote the story. I was convinced that this was happening. And the next day, all hell broke loose. The entire media picked up the story. The Tamil media, of course, loved it. There were banner headlines, sex swami girl, and then to Jayalalitha's credit, I must say that despite her ministers and Sashikala being devotees, she immediately ordered an investigation. Police raided the ashram. He was arrested. And there was one woman who was pregnant. And the DNA test proved that he was the father. So he was in jail. He was given 2 life imprisonments. And I was summoned. Ram Jethmalani was his lawyer. I was summoned to the court to give evidence. But he was very soft on me. I went, flexing my muscles, thinking he'll ask me tough questions. But he unfortunately didn't ask me anything. The other was about the dream of an ordinary girl. Nowadays, it's become, now with the electronic media, it's very common that, the television covers the stories of the poor, deprived. One of my philosophies in my work is that, journalists like writing about big people, prime ministers, presidents, because, it sends us on an ego trip. But I think we have to write about small people, their dreams, their aspirations, the voiceless people. I mean, we are there not only for the glamour of the job. So again, in the Express, I had written a story about a little girl. This was about 20 years ago, who wanted to be a collector. And when the story was published, there was a lot of response, and then she was able to study. So yes, it's been a very exciting journey.
Thank you. Now it's your turn, Parka.
Well, I think I agree completely with what both Rajni and Rashida have just outlined, which is 2 important things. A good story is never about the glamour of the story, and that a good story is a good story irrespective of whether you're telling the story of a half-widow in the Kashmir Valley, or whether you're doing an interview with the Prime Minister or Sonia Gandhi or whoever is the person of the moment. And I think it is also important to never forget that what are we as journalists? We are a bridge between all of you, our viewers or our readers, and stories that are looking for a voice to be heard. It's always the same principle, whether it's what's going on inside the mind of a politician, which you haven't heard yet, or whether it's the stories of the people who live on the margins. The principles of a good story never ever change. I think for me, there have been some obvious watershed moments in my own career, covering the 1999 war, covering the 2002 Gujarat riots, going to countries that Rashida also mentioned and covered way before I did, whether it's Afghanistan or Iraq, Pakistan. Last year, most recently, covering the Arab uprising and the turmoil in Egypt and Libya from the ground. And I think what's very important to me, especially in the electronic media, as a lot of television turns depressingly to radio talk, I'm a bit depressed by that trend. The television used to be about being out there, and increasingly it's all about talk, jabber, jabber, jabber. I think it's remained very important to me to keep going out there, being out there in the field. And I'm listening it's heartening to me that so many people in our audience are applauding as our journalists share tales of the stories they covered, because almost always there's stories out there. And let me tell you, the best stories are never behind a table in a studio. They're always out there. And for me, my biggest attachment in many ways has been consistently covering for 14, 15 years the story of Kashmir. I've seen it through some of its worst years, and I've seen it through some of its better years. And more than events, I think what we sometimes lose is the discipline to follow one area consistently. And I would like to say to everybody who wants to be a journalist, there'll always be events, but please develop expertise, at least in one core area. Make something your area of expertise. And for me, covering Jammu and Kashmir, I think has been one of the most moving experiences of my life. Also one of the most complex stories. You get a lot of galis, by the way, because if you want to cover the travails of a soldier, sometimes the people on the other side of the ideological divide will call you jingoistic. But if you cover a human rights violation, the state will call you pro-separatist. And when you wade into a story that, as Rashomon, the great filmmaker, said, has 7 shades of truth, that's your biggest challenge as a journalist. And try and not avoid complexity, because good storytelling is always in a story that has many layers.
Actually, Barka, that was a good introduction to our next topic, which I was hoping the panelists would share some of their best practices, tips, and advice for the aspiring journalists in the room. So if we could start with Sujata.
Passion for me, you know, it was passion that brought me to journalism. So mainly you should have the passion and the interest and probably set goals. In my case, I was like, I grew a bit horizontally because I was, you know, dilly-dallying with sports, then general, and then business, and now back to general reporting. So maybe you should choose your targets and you should, you know, work towards that. And one more thing is, you know, you should, it doesn't matter if you're, I mean, you know, in the sense, it's better to be a fool for a day rather than, you know, be a fool all your life. So if you don't know something, accept it and then learn. That will be better. That's it.
Thank you.
Rashida?
Passion is a good place to start with, Sujata. But as Barkha said, expertise. Try and focus on one or two core areas where you're good. If you try to do a little bit of everything, that won't work. Hard work, do your background reading and research. For God's sake, never go to interview somebody like Jagjit Singh once told me, a journalist came and asked him, when were you born? I mean, you can't do stuff like that. You have to read up about the person you're interviewing and have your reader, or if you're a television journalist, your viewer in mind. You do not write for yourself. Don't be so full of yourself that you're the greatest and you're a star. No. Keep your eye, keep your focus on your readers. What do they want from you? I think those are important things. You're not able to hear? You can now? Okay. Yeah. I think you should focus on the reader or your viewer. After all, they are your bosses, not the boss who pays your salary. You are there, you are relevant because they read you or they watch you. If Barkha has 5 lakh followers on Twitter, I would say, wow.
Rajni? Rajni?
I pulled some tips down that have just come straight to my mind. The first one, someone said to me a long time ago, is it's a marathon, not a sprint. A lot of people who want to get into journalism desperately want to be on the nightly news straight away, or they desperately want to cover a big war. And you do have to start, often with local journalism like I did, just learning the basics, having the confidence to knock on someone's door when you don't know who they are, or go and meet someone for the first time. And you build that up over time. So that's the first tip. The second one, I agree with whatever's been said before about having a specialism. For me, it was British politics. I knew that, I remember when I worked in local TV, actually, often it was about how you looked. And I remember having of 22, 23, thinking the way I look. Yeah. So I and make that my specialism. And that's how I ended up getting a lot further. Radio or TV if they didn't like the look of me anymore, because I had a subject that would carry me through. The other thing I've written down is aim high. If you want an interview with Tony Blair like I did for the first time, just ask for it and you might just get it. Be nice as well. You never know when someone will end up being your boss. The intern that was in your office 2 weeks ago might end up being your producer one day, and I do think sometimes people forget how important it is to be nice and to smile at people, not just the people you interview, but the people who end up being around you. I remember the day of the Mumbai attacks last July. Nobody else was in the office. Because I have a good relationship with the security guards here, as I was sitting in the live position, they gave me water, they helped watch the TV channels for me, little things like that. There's anyone in an office, anyone that you meet, just be nice to. And as everyone has said before, it's all about the audience. We're in this to serve our audiences. So I always think about whether my audience would find something interesting. At the moment I'm doing business journalism on India Business Report, and it's so easy with something like business just to forget how this relates to our audience, why this matters. So I always keep that in the back of my mind. And the very last tip I would always have is you have a lot of setbacks, you have a lot of disappointments, a lot of letter rejections, but you must let those motivate you rather than put you off.
It's very common that, you know, television covers the stories of...
Thank you. Barkha?
Well, I think so many wise things have been said by everybody, so I'll just add just a little thing. I was curious to hear Rajni say that, you know, she felt this insecurity about how she looked. By the way, you look great, so I don't know why you have that insecurity, but the question is, looking great is all about self-confidence, and I think that's really where it originates from. And as somebody in television, I am concerned about what I like to call the bimbetification of TV. Increasingly, young people are getting onto TV to be on TV. They want to look glamorous. They're more focused on what clothes they're wearing and how their makeup is and what the lighting is and what lipstick it is than the news they're reporting. And that's just terrible. I mean, there's nothing wrong with wanting to look good, but that's not why you join journalism. And please remember, whether it's television, whether it's the internet, whether it's a newspaper, whether it's your blog, it's about the story you tell, not how you look. And do you want to be remembered for somebody saying, hey, she looks good? Or do you want somebody to say, she told a great story? For me, it would always be the second. And so my advice is, please join journalism for the right reasons.
Their aspirations.
Wonderful.
Can I just add to that as well, to what Barker said? Often when I have interns who come to the BBC and I ask them why they want to get into journalism, they don't quite know why. And it's always worth remembering why or what your passion is. So when I remember speaking to a group of schoolgirls in London, and they all said they wanted to just get on to be on the TV. And as Barker says, you've got to have a reason and a goal, even if it's a very far-flung goal, like one day I want to interview the Prime Minister of India because I'm interested in Indian politics, whatever it might be, because people won't take you seriously when you're starting out if you just say you want to be on TV or you want to be on the radio. So you need to actually have an idea, at least to present to somebody when you're an intern or doing work experience.
Thank you.
Asha,
would you share some tips or advice?
Sure. I would say one thing that you should do is be persistent. You have to be persistent in trying to get the story, and in just even when you're going to interview for the job, for the news reporter job, be persistent about it and hang in there.
So yes, it's been
also, I would say sometimes you'll be told that you can't do this, or no, we can't do the interview with you. But if you keep trying, you're more likely to land the interview than not. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All of this has been wonderful advice.
Now it's your turn, Barka.
Pardon?
Sorry, could you repeat that?
I said all of this has been wonderful advice, and I'm going to share 3 of my tips as well. The first one is read everything. If you like a particular writer or TV reporter, follow that person regularly and pay attention to their style. Watch what they do. Secondly, read what you write out loud to hear how it sounds. This is useful in everything you write, even your tweets. And finally, always carry a pen and something to write on. You never know where inspiration may strike. So with all of that wonderful advice, we would like to move on to the question and answer part of the program.
The glamour of the story, and that a good story is a good story, irrespective of whether you're telling.
Adding, or is she? Is there a microphone or something? How are we handling that? You have the microphone? Okay. Can you tell us who you are and who your question is directed to?
The story of a half widow in the Kashmir Valley, or whether you're doing an interview.
You can go ahead.
Hi, it was a fascinating discussion. I'm a student at the Asian College of Journalism, and I hope to go to Columbia in fall. So my question to everyone in this panel is, I heard most of you got into journalism not with any experience or any school that you went to. But I was wondering, in today's world where everyone's so focused on the education part of it, what kind of difference it's made to journalism, and whether you see people with more degrees and less passion, and whether that's changed how people treat journalism in general.
Of course, it's useful to have a degree. I mean, if you get into a school like Columbia, nothing like it. Barka is from there. But the best learning is on the job, because theory is theory and practice is practice. What does Barkha feel?
I agree completely with you, Rashida. Completely agree. I mean, Columbia is a great, great university, and it's a great life learning experience. But my theory on journalism is do the degree because it gives you an exposure to life. But in the end, you can only learn on the job. And stories that
Yeah, I'd just like to add, the best experience I got was working on a student newspaper when I was at university, where I edited the paper, wrote stories, did my first interviews, and also the music magazine that I did as a teenager. And again, you know, a lot of people in the UK particularly do media studies, but the best advice I got was just to study something you're interested in or passionate about. In my case, it was politics and economics. And then be prepared to work in local TV or local radio to get that experience.
You know, on the spot learning, but then these degrees, especially journalism degrees, give you a head start. You have your contacts, you know what or where you can join. You know, it's not something like I was very blank when I joined, whereas today it'll be easier for you to choose a vocation, whether it's a business paper or a general paper, or what you wanted to do, whether it's you know, television or social media or, you know, any internet companies. So the degrees actually help to develop, especially in this competitive world.
Next question.
You know, news has become hello, I'm Amrit Shankar from Madras Christian College. Yeah, I have a question on how media plays in this era how the media plays in this era, you know, with news becoming a commodity. It's everywhere, it's paid news or something like that, scandals coming out. The journalists are losing their respect. Do you think that do you think we'll get respect if we go around with this kind of affairs?
Did you understand the question?
Could you repeat that question, please?
Yeah. News is becoming a commodity nowadays. You know, paid news, sell news. You write about stuffs, yellow journalism. So do you think journalists get respect you know, with this kind of era around?
Okay, the question is about news becoming a commodity, and do you think journalists who write it as a commodity get respect? Paid news. Is paid news respectful?
Yeah. Yes, I agree with you. There are many practices in the media today which are not really good. They are not desirable. But then the media is only a reflection of the society we live in. Paid news is bad, yes. But as readers, as viewers, you should not keep quiet. Why do you people consume such paid news, or if you feel that something is planted on you? Demand quality. Demand it from your newspapers or your television channels, and you will get it.
Next question. Does anyone else want to answer that question? Barkha?
But what is the TRP? It's all of you. And if you reject practices that you don't agree with, then news organizations will be forced to change. The TRP is not an abstraction. And that doesn't excuse malpractices or ethical deficiencies in journalism. But certainly the viewer or the reader must not disassociate themselves from demanding best practices. So I completely agree with what Rashida has said.
Thank you. Rajni, do you want to comment?
I didn't actually catch that question. I'm sorry. Could you just repeat it, please?
I
think I
is
might
not
have
an
got the gist of
abstraction.
it.
Oh, the
excuse.
question is about paid news. Is paid news respectable?
What news? Sorry. I'm sorry. I didn't catch that question.
It's about
Malpractices
news becoming a commodity.
Ethical deficiencies in journalism, but certainly the viewer.
Okay. I mean, I think just to add to whatever the others have said. I mean, yes, it's about the audience consuming this stuff. I mean, in the UK, there's this whole, obviously, issue of phone hacking and details about celebrities' personal information, but when you see the number of people who consume, for example, this information about celebrities, who want to see these personal pictures of someone leaving a nightclub. So it is somewhat of a double standard because people want to consume this. That's why the newspaper proprietors do this in the first place.
Next question.
Hello everybody. It's firstly an honor to have you all in our presence. My question is to Rashida ma'am and also Barkha ma'am. See ma'am, I wanted to ask you about, there's this divide between print and television journalism. Television journalism is always seen as a more glamorous, more quicker, means of disseminating information. But then I find print to be a lot. I mean, I personally prefer print a lot more. But then I'm also discouraged, even though there's a print journalist in my family who's been in the field for around 20 years. Even then, I'm discouraged. Why do you think this divide is, and how do you think we can overcome it?
I think there is space for both, especially in India today. Television is more spot news. You get news in a flash, instant. There is breaking news all the time. In print, we have had to change now because by the next morning, the people generally know what it is. So the news has to be more incisive, more in-depth. I'm happy when you say you prefer print because you'll get a more rounded view. In India, fortunately, elsewhere print is dying because the internet. Not so much the TV, but the internet. But in India, what is happening is millions and millions of new people are coming into literacy. And the first aspiration of somebody who can read is to buy a newspaper. So both are growing. I think both have a place. Barkha?
I agree. I think that a medium is not intelligent or dumb, though some mediums have different strengths. I think, of course, the print has the advantage of stepping back and having and taking a deeper view. Print has had to also reinvent itself in the age of television. Television, under pressure from print, is forced to be less shallow than perhaps sometimes it lends itself to be. So I think we're seeing mediums readjusting to each other. But I do firmly believe that in the end, while different mediums have different strengths and the space to coexist, a medium is neither good nor bad. A journalist is good or bad, shallow or deep.
Get news in a flash, instant.
Can I just jump in on that as well? Rashida said television's primarily on the spot and not always incisive. I mean, the BBC, we do all three, TV, radio and online. So radio wasn't mentioned in that, which I think is still a very, very important medium around the world and probably the most favourite of the three that I work across. But television doesn't have to be on the spot news. It's becoming that way more and more with 24-hour news where people are just standing in one live position. I think Barkha mentioned this kind of trend earlier that people just stand in a live position and don't often necessarily leave it and know what's actually going on. But there is still a lot of room for TV to be insightful too. Depends how you tell the story and who's telling the story. And I think all three have equal validity. And as I say, radio, for example, can take you to a place and transport you to a place in a way that the other two mediums can't either. So I think it's unfortunate that 24-hour news is becoming more of just standing in one place and repeating the same thing, but it doesn't have to be that way.
Internet. Not so much the TV, but the internet.
Maybe, like as Rashida said, there's always space for both print and visual media. It's just the aptitude which suits you better on the spot news, or you can do some research and do a better copy, analytical piece the next day in a newspaper. So just that both have the space.
People are coming into literacy. And the first aspiration of somebody who can...
Do we have another question?
Hi, I wanted to ask you all basically about the whole web censorship that's come up now with PIPA and SOPA and stuff like that. So, like, how do you feel it will affect the media? You know, will it be a hindrance? Because see, if you're going to filter the content that's not you know, exactly accurate, so that you'll have more people technically reading your websites like NDTV and IBN and stuff like that. So you think, how is that like beneficial or is it a hindrance also? Because in terms of the people and in terms of freedom of web and stuff like that, freedom of speech and stuff.
Oh, sorry. Can you repeat that, please?
Yeah. See, okay, basically what I'm trying to ask you is about how web censorship is going to affect the media. in short. I want to know your analysis.
Web censorship?
Yeah, like
online censorship.
Yeah, online censorship.
Can you hear me? Yeah, I'm against censorship of any kind. I think the responsibility with the should be with the journalists. As Barkha said, good journalists or bad journalists, you have to write responsibly, but you cannot have censorship. I'm against censorship of any kind.
Barkha or Rajni?
I didn't actually catch the question, but I mean, I think it's fair to say that I couldn't get the question, but I completely agree with Rashida that censorship is not the answer to disagreement. And increasingly, we're becoming more and more intolerant. We are free to dislike people, to disagree with them, to reject them, to not read their books, to not watch their shows, but you can't control thought. And we're seeing a very, the original question is, but no liberal can stand up for censorship of any kind.
Just to add to that, the internet's of course changed the boundaries of what censorship is or isn't now, because even if, for example, in the UK there's been court cases where an order's been put down so that photos can't be released of someone who's committed a crime because they're underage, for example, those photos ended up on the internet anyway, and it's obviously impossible to regulate what does and doesn't go online. So it's impossible now to even regulate through the courts because the internet's changed everything.
True.
I might add that, especially when you're on social media sites, a good thing to keep in mind is self-censorship.
Another question?
Hi, my name is Akshita. I'm from M.O.P. Vaishnav. Of late, there's been a lot of talk about sensationalism in both broadcast and film, and it has come under a lot of criticism, but it's also brought a lot of stories to light, you know, things that are happening in rural areas. So my question is, do you believe sensationalism is a good thing or a bad thing, or does it work both ways?
Just to repeat the question, this is whether the panel believes sensationalism is a good thing or a bad thing.
Well, I think any news, whether in the print, television, internet, should be interesting. It doesn't have to be sensational. But again, then as consumers of the media, if you want sensational stuff, if you want to know who Shah Rukh Khan is sleeping with, then the media is going to go and give it to you, because I said earlier, you guys are our real bosses. Yeah. You people as consumers will decide what is going to be the quality of the news you get. And there is not much space today for very serious journalism if it becomes boring. Make your stories, your telecasts, whatever you're doing, interesting. Even a very serious story can be said in a very interesting way, provided you work hard. Like business journalism. The lazy business journalist comes back from a press conference or a story with jargon, gives it whatever he has got, he doesn't understand it, just gives it, spills it out, and nobody reads the story. And it becomes a boring story. But if you really understand the subject, research it and write it well or portray it well, it'll be interesting. I don't know why news has to be sensational. If you demand sensational news, that's what you're going to get.
Leave it and know what's actually going on. But there is still
Thank you. Barkha, Rajni, or Sujata?
No, I mean, that's, sorry, absolutely right. I think here we seem to have two definitions, that either news has to be sensational or news has to be boring. I think what Rashida said is right. It has to be interesting. But that cannot become an excuse for no fact-checking, getting stories wrong and not even putting a disclaimer out there or an admission out there or an apology out there that we've got it wrong. I also find that I'm a little disturbed by the trend in my own industry for instant judgment. We have reversed the jurisprudence principle of the innocent unless proven guilty. television channels sometimes have a propensity to declare people guilty on the basis of a mere allegation. We've turned TV studios into kangaroo courts. But as Rashida said, you are our jury. All of you are our jury. And I find it very astonishing that people are so judgmental about the media but lap up the same media. There is some paradox in consumer habits.
Unfortunate that 24-hour news is becoming more of just standing in one place and reporting. If I could just add to that, I agree with everything that has been said before, and we have a different, quite an interesting perspective at the BBC because we're publicly funded, we're a public service broadcaster. We have to cover a lot of stories that some people wouldn't even touch, and particularly as a political journalist for sort of 6-7 years at the BBC, we had to do a lot of stories that perhaps wouldn't necessarily be commercially successful but were important to do. And the importance there was, as Rashida said before, about making it interesting. I worked for a while on Radio 1 as their political reporter, which is a youth radio station in the UK, and trying to sell the European budget to the audience there wasn't easy, but I had to do it. And it's about being creative and interesting with a story. And sometimes that's a challenge, so some lazy journalists will just walk away from something like that. But ultimately, we do have a duty to do some stories that we feel are important, but aren't necessarily who Shah Rukh Khan is or isn't with, for example.
Yeah, like what Rashida and Baka said, you need to make it interesting rather than, think of sensationalism. So maybe anything you write about, even now, you can try to, see what the reader wants and then, try to attract them, and then even if it is a business story, you can always explain it to them in a way that everybody understands. All readers are not economic students or stuff like that. So you should always make it, reader-oriented stories. That will be better.
Thank you. Barka? Oh, that's right. Thank you.
I already answered that, yeah.
That's right, sorry. Do we have another question?
Good afternoon. My name is Nurain from M.O.P. Vaishnav College. And my question to the panel is, as women, we are almost always discouraged from pursuing journalism as a career because people assume that it's very difficult to balance both your career professionally and on the personal front as well. So I would like to know what challenges you faced in handling both your professional and personal lives.
Actually, that's a very astute question. It was meant to be in the original discussion, but somehow I think we skipped it because we wanted to give more time for questions. I think women being discouraged from taking up journalism is nonsense today. It was there 34 years. I could understand it 34 years ago, but not today. Even then, I rebelled against it and I said, no, women can be journalists. It is nonsense, but challenges, yes, you will have challenges. We have in the panel today somebody like Barkha. You know the kind of attack she has had because she is woman. She's a woman because she's so hardworking. There has been a Facebook page which has said, I hate Barkha that. That is the kind of attack she has had. I think it is because she's a woman. Male journalists do not get those kind of attacks. Yes, balancing a home and work life is difficult, but that's not only in journalism. Today, if you're in the IT industry, if you're in banking or the financial services, or a lawyer, you have to put in long hours of work. So it's got nothing to do only with journalism. You'll have to balance your life and home. And believe me, I have 2 children. I had both my children after I started working, and the guilt never leaves you because you just can't give them enough time. If you're giving more than, what you need to give your profession, there's nothing like that. You have to work hard, and the guilt never leaves you. But yes, they understand. And I think I have 2 wonderful children who are better human beings because their mother was a working woman, not necessarily a journalist.
Maybe I'll just deviate a little bit because, in my experience, I feel there is always, in journalism, especially women after marriage and before marriage. Because personally, before marriage, I was all the time, thinking of work. From 6 o'clock in the morning, I used to go for the tour, covering an event, till 2 o'clock in the midnight, when I come back home with the next day's newspaper. it was like full-time work. But when you get, married and you have your responsibilities at home, then you have to, allocate some time for your home also. So in that case, you have to decide what you want to do in life. And maybe in my case, I have a very supporting husband, and so I was able to continue journalism. It might not be so, especially maybe Rashida's case, she had a good support system. Today, not many people have this support system. Probably in the US, like I was talking to them, they have very good professional daycare, childcare centers and things like that. In India, we have to, that support system is yet to grow much. So, after a certain stage, there's a break applied on women's career if she's married and then she has children and all that. But maybe the current generation can, do multitasking and develop and, maybe beat this small minus point, or what you can't call it a minus point, but women are more, okay, when you have a child, you think, okay, I should also focus, spend some time, not regret later and stuff like that. So maybe you have to plan things accordingly.
I'll have a minute for what Suzanne said. Yes, an understanding and a supportive husband is very, very important. Let me relate a small story to you. On the Chennai, which existed 34 years ago, I was sent to Raj Bhavan to cover the president of Zambia or somebody, some dinner, because none of the reporters in Indian Express then had a suit. And they said formal wear, so they sent me. And the chief reporter asked me, how will you go? I said, I'll take an auto and go. I didn't have a car then. So he said, fine, but while coming back, there will be no autos near Raj Bhavan. So one of the journalists, a senior journalist, I will not name, he will offer you a lift. Now that guy didn't offer me a lift because he was very peeved. Here was a chit of a girl. I was just 6 months into the profession, covering such an important assignment. Today nobody would go also for that assignment. But anyway, and then a UNI reporter on a motorbike offered me a lift. I mean, I had to get back home, damn it. So I said, okay. I got onto his bike and came home. And the next day, the entire media was gossiping about how I was having an affair with that guy. I mean, it's that silly. I mean, it can be as bad as that.
Parka? Parka, would you like to comment on that?
I'll come in on that. Is that Rajni? I can't hear. Who's that for?
Oh, it's Asha. Oh, for Barka, the question's for you.
Okay. No, I've loved Rashida's story about the being behind the bike, and I think, today we can laugh at the fact that it was suggested that she was having an affair with this guy. But I think that there is a kind of misogyny that remains in our trade, that some of the stories we get are because, oh, you're a woman, so they indulged you. Oh, you're a woman, so you must be having an affair with so-and-so politician. Get the story. What utter nonsense. And thank you, Rashida, for your comments. Yes, there was a hate Barkha faced group, but I think there's that old saying, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And I think somewhere I realized along the way that a successful woman, or forget successful, any woman in the public space, any woman in the public space will be scrutinized in a different way from a male. Look at our women politicians. How many times have you heard a male politician be called hysterical? How many times have you heard a male politician being called aggressive? When men are aggressive, they're called strong. When women are aggressive, they're abused. They're called cold. They're called all kinds of names. So there is a kind of double standard, but you know what? You get used to it. You get used to it, you basically double up on your strength, and you answer to your own conscience. That is the only thing. You answer to your conscience, you answer to your readers, you answer to your viewers. You do not answer to anybody else.
Rajani, would you like to take the question now?
Yeah, just to agree with what everyone has said, particularly what Barka just said now about, I remember once trying to get a story and I just slammed the phone down, and a very old school journalist said, oh, you're all the same, you women, hard as nails. And, if it was a male colleague, that probably wouldn't have been shared. So I've definitely come up against that, the confidence issue, which I think, a lot of women journalists are seen as too aggressive or feisty, just because they're a bit more confident than perhaps they are expected to be. The other thing I think I've found, certainly, I mean, I'm 32 now, but I started in Westminster at about 26, I think I was, when I first interviewed Tony Blair. And a lot of people saw me as this quite short little Indian girl, and perhaps didn't think I was, you know, I can ask questions as tough as the next person. But I think people have a perception that you're a little girl, and especially in something like politics, where it's a cutthroat industry, you can be prejudged. People expect you to be a certain way, and sometimes that makes you build up more of a confidence, because people think sometimes, not many of my colleagues now, but certainly I felt when I started, who's that young girl who's wandering around doing stories? So you're not always taken seriously, I think. It's obviously impossible to...
Okay, thank you.
I think we have time for one more question. Is there another question from the audience?
Can you hear me? Yeah, my question is actually about media bias. You know, today's media is particularly so biased, say for to the ruling party or, you know, particular section of the society. And you being the fourth estate, you guys are not giving objective reporting as such. It's only about particular sections of the society. So I want to know what's your take on that?
So the question is about, is the media as the fourth estate, are they working are they biased?
Not objective enough.
And not objective enough.
Well, that's a point of view. Yes, there are biases. We are also human beings. The subjective element will creep into, but by and large, a journalist should follow the first principle of journalism: ethics, ethics, ethics. And one of that is that, yes, you should be fair, you should be objective. But personal preferences are bound to creep in.
Yeah, like as she said, it's ethical reporting, you know.
On social media
I don't know, maybe
the thing to keep in mind is
even though I played chess and I knew people who are chess players, it was like, you know, when you report only the what you see, what is to be reported and what is news. It's not like you like someone so you write about them or things like that. So I think maybe students of journalism should concentrate on the ethical value of reporting. Thank you.
Rajini?
I guess...
Go ahead.
Just a really quick point. I mean, from the BBC standpoint, you know, we have it in our charter to be unbiased and present both sides of every story. Sometimes, you know, people see that as the opposite, but, you know, we always have to look at both sides of any story. And sometimes, you know, us journalists want to be able to put a bit of personal opinion, a bit of personal insight, and we are able to do that, but we have to always ensure that we are presenting both sides. And sometimes we wish, I guess, it would be easier just to be a columnist and just give your point of view. But I think it is essential, especially when you're presenting news, to be balanced and unbiased when you're presenting a story.
Okay, Barka.
My name is Akshita. I'm from M.O.P.
No, I mean, I think as Rashida said, the questioner has a point of view, but it's a very sweeping generalization about the entire media. I mean, there is media and there is media, and there are journalists and there are journalists. On the issue of whether clinical objectivity is possible in journalism, no, it's not. It's not. I mean, the very process of editing, the very process of selection and elimination of a quote may sometimes reflect a subconscious bias, but that's where good editors come in. Your editor has to say, this story is not balanced, this story is one-sided, this story is lopsided, you need the other point of view even if you don't agree with it. I also think there are stories and there are stories. Sometimes you see an injustice, you see an obvious injustice and there isn't another side. But in political stories, it's very, very important to remain biased and give equal play to all sides. So all stories can't be clubbed together also. We may see a social injustice that has only one side, but on political points of view, you need both sides, and the buck stops with the editor. The editor has to say your story is not balanced.
Thank you.
Can I just add to that, that even if you are very balanced with the story, you're always going to get someone who's complaining. I mean, particularly when it's contentious issues like the BBC gets a lot of complaints about our coverage of the Middle East, even though whenever we do a story, we're completely balanced and present both sides of any story. During elections, we get complaints potentially from parties saying we haven't had enough minutes of coverage, you've given the other party more coverage, even though if you look at the time allotted, it's exactly the same. So even if you are completely balanced, people in this profession will always say that you're not.
Thank you very much. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have this afternoon. I don't know about you, but I could listen to these women, for hours more. I think we're very lucky to have journalists like this who have come, particularly Rashida, who have come before and blazed a path for particularly for women journalists. And I would just like to say, sort of to wrap up, that the things you should take away from here are to follow your passion. If you do want to become a journalist, follow your passion, find good stories, check your facts, do your homework, and pay attention to your reader. And overall, just follow your dreams. Thank you so much for joining all of us.
Thank you.
And thank you to the panelists.
Thank you.
I think
Thank you.
any news, whether in the print, television, internet,
On behalf of M.O.P. Vaishnav College, I express my heartfelt thanks to our esteemed panelists this afternoon, Ms. Barka Dutt, Ms. Rajni Vaidyanathan, Ms. Rashida Bhagat, Ms. Sujita S., and our moderators, Ms. Asha Bey and Ms. Sarah Talali. Your contribution to this event has been most valuable. I would also like to place on record our thanks to the U.S. Consulate Chennai for partnering with M.O.P. Vaishnav College for Women for this prestigious panel discussion. Lastly, I would like to thank our audience this afternoon. We hope you had a positive experience. Thank you all and have a good day. Thank you.